Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Early Learning Advisory Council meeting today. Um, I don't know if Erin, are you there to change the screens or? Yeah, great. Yeah, so, just kind of to walk through quickly some of our virtual meeting protocols, just please make sure to mute yourself unless you are speaking or responding to questions. Feel free to always use the chat chat box to post your questions. We always have time set aside after every agenda item for Q&A. And also depending upon the presenter, sometimes presenters will go and field those questions as the presentation's in progress. So feel free to use the chat box. If you get disconnected, please rejoin the meeting. And if you experience any technical difficulties at all, there are members of the DCYF community engagement team that are available to provide assistance to you. So, as part of our introductions, because we do have quite a lot to cover today, we're going to use the chat to share introductions. So if you could take a moment and enter your name, where you're located, and your role, if you're an ELAC member, if you're a regional advisor, or if you're a member of the public, if you could just take a moment to enter that in the chat as a way to introduce yourself. Great. Thank you for introducing yourself in the chat, and please continue to do so. Also, if you're able to, if you could maybe change your screen name to reflect also whether you're an ELAC member, a regional advisor, or a member of the public, that would be great as well. So that way we can also see throughout the meeting who everyone is and who they're representing here in this space. I know we're a little bit early. Our first presentation starts at 11:15, but I do see Vicki on on visual. And what I can't tell is if your partner here is presenting with you is also here as well. Yes, great. So I'll just do some real quick introductions and then turn it over to Vicki. Vicki is DCYS Director of the Office of Innovation, Alignment, and Accountability. And Vicki is here with Odessa, I'm going to mispronounce his name, Bertrovich Ryan, who is DCYF Senior Evaluator. And they are here to provide us with an overview of the data dashboard, as well as updates to support ELAC's Fair Starts for Kids Act work. So I will turn it over to Vicki and Odessa.
Thanks so much, Enrica. Good to see you all. It's great to be with you on a rainy, wintry morning. It is pouring here in Tacoma, and winter is something we all deal with, but we're really happy to be with you all here today. Since the Fair Start for Kids Act passed, the Office of Innovation Alignment and Accountability has been allowed time on your agendas each meeting, and we appreciate that. Primarily, we're bringing you data and evaluation updates since we were given specific work in the Fair Start for Kids Act related to data and evaluation. We do not, unfortunately, have any dashboard updates for you today. We don't have any dashboard updates. We continue to update the grants dashboard every month, so long as there are new grants going out. I understand the last round have gone out, and so the most recent update is likely the last grants dashboard update we'll do. Primarily today, we've come to talk with you about evaluation and follow up from our October discussion to let you know where we are. Next slide, please. So today, we're hoping to share with you an update on the Fair Start for Kids evaluation plan and also respond to questions from the October meeting that were raised in terms of how we would use data. And Adasa has a lovely example to share with you today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Adasa Budrevic-Ryan, who works with us in the Office of Innovation Alignment and Accountability on our evaluation and research team. As Enrica noted, Adasa is a senior evaluator on our team, and she is in charge of the Fair Start for Kids evaluation and the report that we are required to produce every other year for that evaluation. Adasa?
Thanks so much for the introduction, Vicki. So I just wanted to start off by contextualizing us a little bit. This is the direct language that calls the need for evaluation of FSK. It's located in Senate Bill 5237, and it says, the department, DCYF, shall consult with its advisory groups and other interested stakeholders and shall submit a biennial report to the governor and legislature describing how the investments funded by the Fair Start for Kids Act have impacted the policy objectives. So when we hear words like impact, we know that's our time to step in. So next slide, please. So in the quote that I just read, it mentions 4 policy objectives, and these are the main ones that we will be looking at. They are to advance racial equity and respond to the growing diversity of Washington State's population, to expand access to affordable, high-quality childcare and early learning experiences, to promote kindergarten readiness by enhancing child development, and to stabilize and support the childcare and early learning workforce. Next slide, please. So in order to analyze these 4 policy objectives, or as we like to think of them, outcomes, the first major thing that we did in our evaluation plan was to come up with a logic model. Logic models are a graphic illustration of the step-by-step relationships between planned work and intended results. It's a visual way to highlight how a program's implementation, resources or inputs, the activities and outputs of a program will produce the desired outcomes. So if we apply this to FSK, on the very far left column, we have our 4 main outcomes: equity, access, kindergarten readiness, and stabilization. The next column is filled with specific FSK activities. For example, equity grants, expanding access to ECAP and subsidy, delivering infant early childhood mental health consultation, and providing rate enhancements, just to name a few. What I just said doesn't encompass all of them. And so these activities lead to outputs. Typically, these are mainly reported as descriptive data, normally in counts or percentages. So maybe we will report on the number of grants distributed, the amount of money, or maybe we might want to know what % of the early learning and childcare workforce is BIPOC, something like that. And so taking together these activities and these descriptive outputs help inform our outcome metrics, or the direct ways that we're going to measure our policy objectives. This is what the last column represents. And the outcome metrics is primarily where OIA's work with the FSK evaluation lives. So some examples of outcome metrics that I'm going to be looking at is whether there's reductions in racial and ethnic disparities and disproportionalities in certain outcomes, whether the gaps in access to childcare and early learning are reducing, if kindergarten readiness is improving, and for whom is it improving, and finally, if providers exiting and entering the childcare market is reducing. This is also known as churn. So that's kind of an overview of the logic model. It's kind of the foundation of our evaluation. And oh, sorry, Vicki, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Susan's question in the chat. She's asking who developed the draft logic model. Adasa, I'll let you speak to that, but I did note that we did bring an earlier version of the draft here to ELAC in October, seeking input and have incorporated some of that input. In addition, I believe, Adasa, you've worked with a group that is put together for the Fair Start for Kids Act to gain input as well. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. I initially developed it and I sent it out to the FSK team at DCYF. And Vicki, I think you presented 2 months ago to this group, and we noticed that some threads overlap. So we made sure to represent that by adding a color of a certain thread into another thread just to show that they're interconnected. So.
Thanks, Adasa. Sarah, Susan, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it gets to it raises more questions for me with regard to often we are presented with ideas, but there's not much childcare voice in the development of the draft models. And so I think that's a room for growth area where we're not seeing sort of finished products and we get to give feedback, because it's, we want to be part of the design, not just give feedback on the design. So it does answer my question. I think it's opportunity here for changes in the future.
Thanks, Susan.
You bet.
So the end, I would just say, and yes, these slides should already be in your slide deck for this meeting. If not, they will be. We submitted them in advance. I would say that the final product here is not the logic model. The logic model helps us guide, but the final product is actually the report. As Adasa indicated, that was called out in the Senate bill for Fair Start for Kids Act, and it's a report. There are 2 reports, you may recall, that were called for in that legislation. One report is authored by ELAC. You all have a report to submit, and then the agency has a report to submit. So this is the agency's report, and you all have been and will continue to be engaged from before the beginning of development, the report. So we'll continue to do that. Thanks so much for the feedback. I appreciate it. Adasa, go ahead.
So just continuing on the last thought, this is a lot of information to keep track of, right? There's a lot of details in the logic model, and like Vicki said, it's really helpful for evaluators, but it's also really helpful for implementers. And so with the evaluation, there's kind of like a cycle: planning, data collection, if there is data to collect, analysis, and then reporting, which is the final legislative report. And so right now I'm in the analysis stage where I've developed my logic model. And so now I need to actually run some analyses to get some results to report on these 4 primary policy objectives. I just wanted to give you a snippet of what that process looks like, which is in the next slide. So I kind of simplified it. It's a little bit more detailed than this, but for each policy objective, I write down what the analysis is needed, and then what data source I might go to. Sometimes the data already exists in a dashboard or in a report, and so in that case, I would just go to those areas. Some things that I also keep track of that isn't listed on here is who my collaborators are, who are also working on these analyses. The early learning folks on the research and evaluation team, we want to align our work since sometimes we need the same results for our different purposes. And so I keep track of who's doing which part. And sometimes I also have kind of almost like a qualitative section where I keep track of like the last time, let's say like an update on the last time I asked for a data share agreement and things like that, or some highlights from a meeting that helped inform that analysis. So yeah, I just want to show you kind of the stage that the evaluation plan is currently in, but let's hone in on just one analysis for now. This analysis was brought up. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Before we move on to the example, I just want to take a moment here and see if we have any questions. I noticed Soleil had a question and she answered it herself. So thanks, Soleil. We're going to move on and use the removal expulsion data as an example. But I wonder if others might have questions about this step or thoughts about how we're organizing the work. As Adasa said, each of the policy objective questions, to what extent have these policy objectives been met, requires an analysis and requires a data in order to conduct that analysis, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. And Adasa here has given an example of some of the analyses at a high level that she intends to use to answer some of these policy objectives, such as measuring childcare removals and expulsions, which we'll talk more about in just a moment. For access, it's looking at the percent of childcare need met, especially in zip codes with high concentrations of either children of color or other high populations of poverty, those kinds of high need areas. Kindergarten readiness, so measuring what's known about kindergarten readiness in the FSKA investment areas. And then in workforce, we hope to be able to look at both provider churn, that's coming into the number of providers coming into and out of the market, as well as continuity of childcare and how that might have been affected by FSKA. And then she's got the specific data sources that she would look to conduct those analyses. In the scheme of the evaluation, the program evaluations that OIAA conducts, this is a pretty large one, and we probably won't in this first report be able to get to everything we'd like to get to. The report's due to be published in September, which means we have to be substantially done with it by June in order for it to go through all the review and approval processes that it has to go through. So we anticipate that we're going to Adasa will do a lot of analysis and presentation of results with this first report, but that we'll also probably have a wish list to hold over for the next set of analyses. So I just wanted to say more about this slide and give an opportunity for any additional questions that folks might have about this approach.
Vicki, it looks like we have a hand raised from Angelia.
Hi. Yes, my question is around the removal and expulsion by race and ethnicity. I understand you can measure that. I'm curious if after you measure it, there will be any analysis as to why per each one of those, so that not only do we measure, yes, this occurred to this particular group, but also why it occurred. Is that a part of the analysis, or just only the removals and the expulsions and the race and ethnicity?
That's a great question, Angelia. I'm not certain that we have access to the why, although let's go through the example and see. If we do not have access to the why information, if that is not a part of the intended analysis, then I might want to go back to the programs and see what they're doing inside DCYF, the programs who receive that information, to see what they're doing with the why. But it's a great example of the kinds of qualitative data that help make more clear what's happening in the quantitative data, and wherever possible, we want to bring that in. So thanks so much.
Yeah, because what we don't want, in my case, working for 30 plus years, it's great to say, don't remove, don't expose, whatever. If you don't have a reason behind the why, and then you're not allowing for the fact that some of the providers are not trained, prepared, have the adequate staff, then you're actually putting them in danger and in harm. And so we need to look at if some of the whys need to mean we need greater resources for some of these facilities so that they can do a better job and not just say, oh my God, we're, exposing, removing X amount of children. That's terrible. Well, yes, but if we keep them and then the staff do some harm, then that's really dangerous. So I just felt like we need to do both, because in my instance, I know for a fact more resources need to come to some of these programs so that they can do a better job. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Angelia. Couldn't agree with you more. And the measurement of those resources and the extent to which they're available is a part of what we'll be doing as well. Adasa, I'll let you go on.
Yeah, I'll just add that I know nationally some reasons why teachers may give for resorting to expulsion or removal. It's already some of the things you touched on, Angelia, maybe feeling overwhelmed, not having the right training, work conditions, low salaries, things like that. But I think it's really important to also know on a local level in Washington why it's happening. So if we could go, I think it's the next 2 slides. Yeah, so this is, I took this from a report that's currently being worked on in DCYF. It's an equity metric report. So this is a situation in which I didn't need to look at raw data to create my own analysis. This result already existed, so I will just include it in my legislative report that's due this fall. And so what this graph shows you is expulsions from licensed childcare over time, broken down by race and ethnicity. And I kind of wanted to contextualize a little bit to just give an example of how I might talk about it in the report. So, and I know you all know this, but according to research, we know that early learning in childcare helps with children, for them academically and social emotionally. But we do know from recent national data from the last 5 years that children are being expelled at high rates, with some showing up to 250 times a day. And so when programs do resort to the practice of expulsion, it deprives young children of the benefit of early childhood education. They lose the chance to socialize and learn, have positive interactions. They miss out on chances to develop and practice the very skills that they may need. They may develop negative self-views and about school, and it also impacts their families, right? So if children are getting removed, parents may spend time looking for care. This results in job loss, access to services that they may once had, and increased stress, which impacts the home environment. We also know that removals and expulsions don't happen equally for all children. We know that there's a disproportional rate depending on the child's race, ethnicity, their age, gender, and disability status. So Black children, specifically Black boys, are expelled at higher rates. So are younger children. So children ages 4 are expelled at higher rates than K through 12 children. And those with disabilities are also expelled at high rates. So zooming back to Washington, unfortunately, we aren't able to capture the rate at which certain racial and ethnic groups are over or underrepresented relative to the underlying licensed care population. So we don't know yet in Washington if we're seeing what's happening in national research, but we do have this graph, which is showing the number of expulsions over time broken down by race and ethnicity. So for the legislative report, we would probably want to highlight that FSK began implementation in 2021, and we should pay particular attention to how trends since 2021 have changed. So overall, it seems like expulsions are declining for almost all of the racial and ethnic groups after 2021, with the exception of the unknown racial ethnic group. As a side note, race and ethnicity is not collected universally across all programs. And the unknown category, as far as I understand, is often used when families opt out of reporting their race and ethnicity. And so that is kind of an example. I don't know, Vicki, if you'd want to add anything else about how we may use this.
Yeah, Dasa, I think between now and the time we do the report, we should be able to come up with a rate. We should be able to normalize this over the child population 0 to 12. I also would note that this chart actually doesn't show a decrease. Perhaps, Dasa, you have other data that shows a decrease, but because this is percentages, the percentages will always equal 100. So this does not show a decrease in expulsions. If there, we probably should additionally show the number of expulsions and reported and what that means over time. Perhaps we can figure out a way to do that on the same chart. But Soleil, to answer your question, this chart does not show us that the total number is declining. We should have access to those data, but it's not on this chart.
Vicki, we have a hand raised from Ida. Oh,
Sure. Go ahead, Ida. Thanks, Eric.
Well, I know in the new WAC implementation of 2019, I think it was, that the new WACs came in with the non-expulsion policy that was implemented. It was a WAC for licensed childcare providers in order to avoid this problem. But I know, so based on, race and expulsions, I think one of the biggest issues here is the lack of support. I heard someone highlight, burnout and stuff like that, but it's other outside sources, evaluation, support, mental health for not only families and children's. I think it goes a lot deeper than that. So when we try to find out why it's still happening and stuff like that, I think there should be other funding streams that support providers to have these inclusive environments to where, where it's culturally competent, intercultural intelligence associated to working with diverse families. And then not only that is outsourced evaluation to be able to get additional supports to avoid continued expulsion. And we all know these WACs were implemented, and I'm curious to see if, just like Vicki highlighted, did we see less expulsion since that happened? I don't see that here per se. Maybe a tad based on the percentages that how it started, and then it peaked in 2021 and then dropped in 2022. Was that the impact of COVID? There's so much to look at here and to unpack, but yeah, that's just my opinion. I was sitting here thinking, thought I'd share.
Thanks, Aida. I appreciate your thinking, and I would agree with everything you've said. So in addition to contextualizing in the national research, we would, of course, contextualize within the services that have been implemented that are intended to affect this. So if you go back to the logic model slide, Erin, I think that's 3 back, this one. It's hard to see here, but it's contained, the child expulsion data is contained as an output in the orange area, which also speaks to reporting the number of providers doing the mental health consultant work, the volume of mental health consultations, and some other service kinds of provision here. So it's not just about reporting the expulsions by themselves, it's about reporting the expulsions in the context of the work being done to prevent the expulsions from happening. So yes, and Jamie, to answer your question, the race ethnicity is provider reported. And in terms of mixed race children, we have standards inside DCYF and OIAA for how we account for children and adults who might otherwise be recorded as multiple race. We should be collecting the data in a way that allows us to see that. And by our standards, if a child is reported as, and this is based on our former Washington State Disproportionality Advisory Committee recommendations that happened before DCYF, and we brought them into DCYF. If a child is reported as mixed race with American Indian Alaska Native, they are reported in the AIAN category. If they are reported as mixed race Black, they are reported in the Black child category. So we to the extent possible, disaggregate the multi-race category so that we can count those children, given that multiracial is the largest, the fastest increasing multi-racial ethnic group in the state and across the nation. The WASRDAC Advisory Committee felt it was important to disaggregate multiracial where we could, so that we're not counting them in some other category that is hard to see what they mean. Sorry, that was more technical than I intended. Jamie, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, Vicki. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Ida, again, thanks for your comment about the need to contextualize within the services that are being provided. If there are other services being provided or that you think might be needed that we could measure and count and use here as part of the context, we'd be happy to consider trying to find data to do that. Other than, we've certainly identified the mental health consultation as a need here, but if there are other services you think are important for us to include, we can consider that.
Well, I think the building a resource for providers to outreach to. Right now, all we have is our early achievers coach, who could then potentially provide us with some mental health components that they have, but then do they have the bandwidth for it? I think in my county or in the state of Washington, there's 15 to 5,000 licensed providers, right? So where is the funding going to help build this to avoid further expulsion rates, and obviously specifically of children of color, but I think there's a lot there. Like who do we reach out to for further evaluation, for support systems, for one-on-one support within our programs to avoid this happening? There's always a loophole. Providers are able to do ways of how they try to support and then still ultimately terminate care and expel children. How can we avoid that? I mean, in the 24 years I've been in business, I've never expelled a child. Like there has to be a bigger support system in place in order for us to, I think there's the children aren't the issue. It's the system in place.
Oh, it's definitely not the children being the issue. But I would say that we have had to, in our years, 50 plus years, have a child go to a place where they could be better supported. So I just want to say that if those providers that can make it work, that's great. But for the rest of us that need that extra support, because your typical childcare teacher is not trained or has the expertise level to do what developmental preschools do, but we often still get developmental preschool children because they're only there for 3 hours maybe, then they come back to us. It is not fair. It is not fair that they're in a classroom with 3 teachers and 8 children, and then they come back to us. So we need to say that we have to make those equitable services in normal childcare focuses and support those staff so that they can feel equipped to do that best job.
Thanks, Angelia. Great context. All right. Well, certainly if you think of additional ways of contextualizing the needs here for supports for providers, I heard the need to build a support system. I heard the need for probably more mental health consultation. We can certainly contextualize in the data we have on those kinds of things. Thanks, Angelia, for mentioning the developmental preschool. Let's take a look, Adasa, at what data we might have related to developmental preschool and whether we can report on the portion of those children who might be being served in other settings where they need additional support. I'm not sure we have those data, but I want to check and see if we do. Thanks so much, both of you. And then Susan, to answer your question, is the data inclusive of school-age kids? Yes, it is. the entire report is inclusive of school-age children. Where we have sufficient data, we hope to break it down into age groups. I'm not sure that expulsion data allows us to do that, but where we can, we hope to break the data down into age groups. But the report needs to cover children through school age.
Thanks, Vicki, because one of my concerns is that for school age kids, we serve kids who they may have a one-on-one aid all day long, and then that aid ceases to exist as far as the child is concerned once they hit the childcare space. And I believe the best solution is to have that aid follow the kid. The service should follow the kid. It shouldn't be contingent on where the kids are. And I think that if those kinds of solutions can be offered in any of these reports, we should seriously consider them, because as Angie said, and it's about the kids. So thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Susan, for that comment about school-age children. So that sounds like a similar need to what I heard Angelia talk about in terms of developmental preschool. You've got children who are being served in other settings that are specifically designed, or where they're getting very specific high-end support to support their needs. And then they come into your environments, more generalized environment, where those resources aren't necessarily following the child. And that could result in some concerns about the child not having their needs met and the provider not being supported.
Yes, and unfortunately in the childcare setting, not all families are tolerant or accepting of kids that we want to serve. And then you have the additional pressure of what families are saying to you about like how their own child may be impacted by the more challenging or needy, or the child who has more special needs. And so the context is much greater than, are we expelling kids and why, and so on and so forth. And a lot of it isn't necessarily in the control of the providers themselves.
Thanks for that insight, Susan. That's great. We'll definitely take that back and all of these comments back and find ways to contextualize the data in those kinds of concerns. Thank you so much for the discussion. All right. Adasa, you want to go ahead and wrap up? I think we've covered the material we plan to today. We will continue to bring these kinds of examples of data and how we're putting together the report all throughout the development of the report between October and June, as we're developing the report, so that we can get this kind of input and guidance from you all and make changes where it seems appropriate. Thanks so much. Adasa, anything else you want to say here?
Yeah, I just hope that next time we meet, I'll have some more actual results to show you about this topic and others too. And I'm looking forward to those discussions.
In the meantime, feel free to send us specific ideas you might have. Our emails are there, and we will look forward to seeing you if we're invited to participate in your next agenda. Thanks so much. Enrica, I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Adasa. And also, I'm noticing just a comment in the chat from Kathy about, with the 2 years of COVID, seeing the number of children in need of support on the rise. And I know what I see that I've seen that as well. Great point, Kathy. What we're going to do next is I'm going to turn it over to Lois at this time, and she's going to walk us through some of the state agency, our feedback loop, coalition updates. So Lois, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Enrica. Appreciate you, and want to thank Vicki and Adasa for being here today, and wish both of you happy holidays, and appreciate your always being willing to share and your openness to the feedback of ELAC. It is very much appreciated. So I just want to send that to both of you. So I want to, if you guys would please put Aaron or Eric a link to the last minute meetings in the box, So if folk need to take a few minutes to review them, we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So I know that there are folk that it would be helpful for them to be able to see that. So since we're a little ahead of schedule, why don't we just give folk a few minutes if you put up the links to the October meeting minutes, the feedback loop, and the state agency partner and regional reports. Thank you very much, Jessica. So there's all three documents for everyone to take a few minutes, maybe give you 5 minutes to just kind of go over them. And then we'll come back together and see if there's any questions or discussions. And then we will look at voting on the minutes for ELAC members. All right, do folk need a few more minutes? If you're good, if you would just choose your reaction button and put thumbs up. If you need a little bit more time. Oh, I see a lot of thumbs up coming, okay. All right, I see a majority of thumbs up. For any folk that need a little bit more time, you can just add it in the chat, but I'm seeing majority of thumbs up. Okay, so let's take a look, members. Yeah, I want to see if there's any questions about the October meeting minutes, questions or corrections. All right, well, if there's no questions or corrections, then why don't we go ahead and vote on accepting the minutes? And what we'd like for you to do is to place your vote in the chat. Feel free to use thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down, and this is for ELAC members and RAs. All right, Erin or Jessica, let me know. Has everyone voted, members and RAs?
I've counted about 8 thumbs up. Make that 9.
Oh, okay, and then Debbie, thank you, Debbie. Debbie's abstaining. So we'll note that Debbie, so you know, is what we call our sideways vote. All right, well, if there's no other questions, we'll move on. For the feedback loop, just want to see if there's any questions. I will ask Erin if you would share the CE letter. Let's see if anyone has any questions on that too. We had, if you remember, during our last ELAC meeting, had agreed that we wanted to send out a letter to the leadership team about the future of community engagement in light of the leadership changes that were made. And so this is the response. You can click on it. Jessica was kind enough to place it in the chat. We did discuss this during an executive session, but also want a chance for community members to be able to see it as well. And Erin just shared that the letter is included in the feedback loop doc and the link above as well. So with that, are there any questions on the feedback loop or any comments about what's contained in it? You guys are really quiet today. Is everyone dreaming of mistletoe and hot chocolate or something? It's really, really quiet. All right, no problem, Kathy. All right, well, we'll move on to the state agency partner and regional coalition updates. Oh, welcome, Debbie. Always happy to have you. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the coalition work? I just do want to point out, going back to the state agency and partner updates, you see we do have a contact at DOH, as well as Ryan is there from OSPI. Just so you see some of the projects that are going on, if you guys want to go back, and if you have questions, just know you can always email the folk that share the reports, and the same is goes for the coalition too. As you can see where the coalitions, some of them, a lot of the groups take off this time of year. So I'm looking forward to receiving, and I'm sure you guys are too. I'm sure we'll have more robust reports too. Hey guys, at this point, what we'll do is I'm going to ask one more time if there are any other questions. We do have another, 10 to 15 minutes before we're supposed to break for lunch. I do want to share something that came up that we did discuss in executive session with the ELAC members and RAs, and that is around the DCYF retention grants. It's been brought to the attention of ELAC members that there is some concern about the way the grants were distributed, and the application process and requirements being unclear to providers, resulting in a large amount who should have been qualified not receiving funds or not being on the list to receive funds, and others who are on the list to receive funds who should not be, because of the application instructions and requirements not being as clear to providers as they felt they should have been. what we are going to do, we have agreed, looked over the draft of a letter that we plan to send out to all members and RAs of ELAC, requesting that the department look into a way to support those staff members that were excluded, and to take a look at the process that was used in order to calculate the grant amounts that went out. So members and RAs, that letter will be going out to you for your review, and we'd like for you to be able to take a look at the language, and you'll have a 24-hour turnaround because we know time is of the essence. The $13 million that was shared at the August ELAC meeting are federal funds that must be utilized by the end of December and dispersed by that time. So time is of the essence. It was brought to our attention that the funds, that it was stated that the funds have been dispersed and maybe they're in a queue to be sent out, but from the feedback we received during the executive committee today, as well as from various advocates in the field, that providers have not actually received the funds in their bank account. So we're hoping that we'll be able to work with the department as the advisory group to help them find a solution to support providers and to be able to equalize the distribution of the retention funds. Enrica, did I miss anything? Do you have anything to add?
No, I think you actually gave a really nice, a nice summary of that. I don't have anything further to add other than really there is truly a very tight turnaround time. So RAs and ELAC members do be looking at your email later this afternoon. I believe Aaron and the CE team is going to get this out probably before 1 o'clock this afternoon.
And the sooner that you respond, the better. I see Debbie put a comment in there that it says DCYF advertised amount to providers is $700, but that doesn't take into account taxes that will be paid. It also doesn't take into account I'd imagine there is a 15% amount that can be withheld based on the provider's discretion. So that too would lower that amount. So that is those two things are not addressed in the letter, but just basically, this is what has been shared. This is what we are hearing from the field. And these are suggestions on ways that this situation can be turned around. So we just ask for members and RAs to please look out for that letter and respond back. I'm not sure, Aaron, if your plan is to ask them to, if you're planning to send it in as a survey monkey for them to be able to vote thumbs up or down, or what the plan is going to be, but I'll would appreciate, I'm sure you'll make that clear when you send it out.
And I also just sent you an email, Lois, to kind of just a brief review of it, of how we'll communicate that. So, but yes, we could do either one.
Okay, well, Enrica and I will definitely take a look at it during the break and get back to you, because I think the sooner we can get that out, the better. Time is definitely of the essence. Just wanted to check and see if any members, RAs or community members have any questions. Thank you, Susan. I see your comment.
I just want to say thank you because unfortunately, this was modeled off of something that Seattle did and King County, Seattle did, and moving into the state. All the goodwill around those two pieces, it's not goodwill right now. And so there's a lot of hard feelings, hurt, emotions, providers feeling trapped and trying to figure out if they've got to come up with the additional dollars to make it right, which is not what should have ever been thought of. And so whatever you all can do to help support that, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Angie. I think that one of the things, and I know that the intent was to bring joy to the field and not to raise the anxiety level of providers or staff, or to create any division between staff and their director owners or family home providers and their staff. As they read the announcements, because some are, signed up for newsletters and see the amount, and it isn't very clear about taxes or the 15%. Someone just thinks I'm supposed to receive $700, and we are, as a community, and we always talk about this, as we are an early learning community, we have to support each other, and ensuring that things are done in an equitable manner is part of the core of the mission of the Early Learning Advisory Council. And so, based on the feedback from members, as well as hearing from folk in the community, we brought this up and plan to at least send a letter. Our hope is if there's no stopping this runaway train as it goes down the mountain to slam into an ice wall, we are hopeful that there is a way possibly for the legislature or to work with DCYF to rectify this as far as funding is concerned. That was one of the suggestions that was shared out during the executive session. So that is included in the letter, which you guys will see. So that's it on that piece. Are there any other questions or comments? And if not, because we always enjoy giving you the gift of time, and since this is a pretty full day, we'll break now for lunch. We are supposed to break from 12:15 to 1, so we'll give you a few extra minutes, and we'll join back at 1 o'clock. And at 1, we are going to, and I'm hopeful that folk will definitely come back. We're going to be introduced to the new DCYF training site for childcare providers. Marlene White and Karma Hugo in her new role will be here to share information about that. And then after that piece, which will be about an hour, just to think about, they want to know what questions you have about the new training site and what suggestions do you have about the site. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're observing that. And then after that, we'll have an update from the Fair Starts for Kids Act Temporary Licensing Subcommittee. And they'll present the recommendation report. And then we'll have our poll, and Enrica will, as she brought us in today, she will take us out and be ready for talk a little bit about 2023. So that's the rest of the afternoon. Again, please come back at 1 o'clock and we'll see everyone then. Thank you so much. Thank you, CE team. I want to ask everyone to be sure and type your questions or comments into the chat. The DCYF staff will be available to answer those. I want to take the time to introduce the DCYF Professional Development Coordinator, Marlene White, and Learning Management System Coordinator, Karma Hugo. They're here to provide an update and gather feedback on the new early learning management system for childcare, early learning, and childcare providers. Just want everyone to join me in welcoming them today. And just a reminder of the questions that we're going to be using Jamboard to collect feedback, and we'll be going into breakout groups. And the biggest thing will be suggestions you have and questions. So I am going to turn this over to Marlene and Karma. Welcome.
Hi, Lois, and hello, everyone. My name is Karma Hugo, and I've been the Learning Management System Coordinator at DCYF since this August. And I'm here today with Marlene White, who is the Workforce Development and Public Relations Manager. And we are going to share with you about DCYF's new training site. So we have some slides to present. And then, as Lois mentioned, we are going to have some time for Q&A and then go into breakout to collect more questions and suggestions from the group. So let's go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. Thank you. All right, DCYF's new training site will be the place where childcare providers will find, access, and complete trainings all in one place. It will be the place that trainers and training organizations will manage, record, and create events. They're in that new site, eliminating the use of multiple platforms. Training applicants will use the new site to become state-approved trainers, which will streamline the process for them. Next slide. As things progress, you can stay up to date with DCYF's new training site through a dedicated web page. Marlene's going to drop the link for that in the chat for you. We will be keeping that page current with timelines, frequently asked questions, and other useful information as things progress. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background around the new training site and why it's coming to be. We have received feedback from a wide range of users who have really made it clear that Washington needs a more robust, more integrated learning system to meet the needs of the early learning workforce. We've outgrown our current training systems. And this feedback has been expressed again by just numerous stakeholders and users, specifically thinking about feedback expressed by childcare providers and other learners for whom training is an ongoing requirement. One example is some feedback collected from the state-approved training program revision, as well as data that has been consistently collected from technical assistance records that indicate that providers have difficulty searching for and finding training, and that they find Merit challenging to use, and especially if they are non-native English speakers. The new training site will have more responsive translation capabilities and other features that will improve the experience of searching for and registering for training, also for learners to track and manage their training progress. Training organizations have expressed the need for more dynamic and responsive features to create and update trainings with less duplication of process. Trainers using the online learning component of the current training site have provided considerable feedback about challenges they have communicating with students, monitoring progress, and managing participant completion. The new training site will simplify the process of setting up and managing trainings. It will improve coordination between trainers and training organizations, offer better reporting functionality, and be better equipped to support online learning opportunities. Additionally, we know that there are early learning programs like ECAP and ESIT that have specific training needs that are not well supported by the current system. It requires currently a lot of manual tracking and reporting. And the new site will be better able to accommodate the more unique use cases like those of ECAP and ESIT, including features for programs to track and monitor staff qualifications and training progress. And then also just thinking about feedback at a sort of wider systems level integration, that although the current training site has successfully increased access to training options and created new avenues for providers to meet requirements and grow professionally, it does have many limitations. We really need a more interconnected platform for our professional development with an infrastructure that can better integrate existing data systems and adapt to Washington's unique needs. One way that this was put to me was that we've simply outgrown our current training system, and this is true. In 2018, DCYF began to explore the availability of commercial, either an off-the-shelf or a software service to provide solutions to all or some of the needs that have been expressed, and looked into purchasing a tool that was already created and could be adapted for our state. Through our partnership with the National Workforce Alliance Registry, DCYF identified a product called Insight, created by a vendor called New World. New World has 15 years of specialization in early learning systems design and development. Their tool, Insight, is used by 12 other states and was designed specifically to meet the needs of the early learning workforce. Using Insight will allow Washington to better meet the needs that we have now and to take advantage of development advancements that will be driven by a broader use and specifically use within the field of early learning. Next slide, please. Just review a few of the features that we're excited that the new site will bring and that will help our learners, training organizations, trainers access and navigate it with ease. Some of these features include improved reporting, automated alerts, simplified application process, language customization, collaborative learning opportunities, for example, integrating with Zoom, centralized learning materials, an e-content library, and improved navigation and accessibility for all users. Next slide. So although we anticipate the launch will occur in 2023, the timeline for the transition from the current training site to the new training site is evolving. But here is what we can tell you so far. So our initial focus has been trainers and training organizations. And back in August, we made the first external announcement about the coming transition via the professional development newsletter. Across September and October, we worked with state and national training organizations who had a significant volume of trainings in the current training system to import those trainings into the new training site. And this is really allowing us to see how the functionality works and really get those trainings set up and ready to go. And we also made at that time an external announcement to all childcare providers about the upcoming transition. In the month of November, we conducted user testing with state trainers and training orgs, and Marlene will be sharing more with you about this process and some of the early findings in just a moment here. And the results from that user testing have been part of discussions that we have been having internally about next steps and things that need to happen. During the month of December, we're reviewing and approving those imported trainings, again, practicing those processes of setting trainings up in the new system. We're also planning the next stage of coordination with trainers and training orgs who had smaller volumes of trainings to help get them ready to move those trainings into the new system. We are also beginning to identify materials and other resources that will need to be created based on the feedback from user testing, as well as existing resources that have been created for the current site. And then as we move into the first part of 2023, trainers and training organizations will begin to get access to the new training site where they can begin to schedule events and gain familiarity with the system. And then progressing further into 2023, we will engage in another round of user testing, this time with providers, childcare providers, and other learners. We will continue to develop resources and materials with a focus on learners, and then finally launch the new training site. Resources that will be developed will include things like webinars, videos, office hours, and of course, support from DCYF's navigators, who are an incredible team inside DCYF who provide a lot of support to trainers and training organizations, providers and learners who are taking trainings, looking for trainings. Just an important note is that learners will continue to use the current training site to access required trainings until that transition takes place. So things are really still kind of status quo. All right, and at this point, I'd like to turn things over to Marlene, and she will share more about that user testing.
Thank you, Karma.
And I'm here with some sick kiddos, so if you hear them in the background, I apologize. Yeah, so I'm excited to say that we're taking a human-centered design approach with this project. And a human-centered design is a problem-solving technique that puts real people at the center of the development process, which enables us to create a product or a service that resonates and is tailored to that audience. So like this slide says, the user is at the core of the product, service, or policy design. And I'm really going to nail this down. So my couple slides are kind of more like introductory just to like set the stage. But yeah, go ahead and click on the next one, please. Thank you. So usually when I talk about this approach, I just say UX, honestly, because it's just so much shorter. So let's talk about UX. So what is it and why is it important? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading the chat. Yes, everyone's feeling sick, so good luck. But yes, let's talk about UX. So UX stands for user experience, and it's the experience a user has when interacting with a product, a system, or service. And, you know, in this like UX field, there's other terms that are sometimes used interchanging, like usability or testing or research. And DCYF also uses liberatory design. And the difference between all these terms really is the methods and the way they're conducted. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm really going to be focusing on user-centered research and user-centered testing, which is what we're doing now. We're testing the site, and we're conducting research on our users and the site. And I'm going to go more into this in the next slides, how we go about it. So, but basically my role, yeah, this is great. But my role is to work with the users. What I do is like work one-on-one with them. And so right here, this is like the methodology. This is how we're going about it. And if you can like think if we were in person, this is what it would look like in person, where we would be most likely sitting next to each other. I would be the person with the phone taking notes, and the user would be navigating the site as they navigate it. But what's nice about conducting them virtually is that I'm able to do them, you know, with people from all over the state, which has been really nice. So our format has, you know, they're virtual one-on-one interviews. We've been conducting them in Spanish, English, and Somali, our 3 target languages in the early learning field. And, you know, they've ranged between 75 minutes to 2-hour sessions. People have been very grateful when we go over time. And I'm like, no, I want to keep going. So we've done them up to 2 hours. My target was a total of 12 sessions, but we actually have had only 10. So this is actually outdated, and that's because it was really hard to recruit Somali speakers. We only got 2 instead of 4. Hold on, I'm reading the notes or the comments. Okay, yes, I'll get to your question, Lois, in a second. But yeah, so the methodology, basically, oh, and I really want to point out that, so the way this works is like we have users sit with us one-on-one, and we have them walk through a series of tasks, what they would normally do as part of their work. So for the specific user testing that we've conducted in November, it's been specific to trainers and training orgs. So those who are going into the site and putting their trainings or offering their trainings, they're really trainers or training administrators who are really overseeing the training side of things. So I have, you know, I have to work, I'm not the subject matter expert, so I have to work with our team to learn what these users actually do on the site. And we have a series of tasks that we put in front of them as they would do on our current site. So we ask them, hey, can you create a training template and show me how you would go about it? And I'd watch them as they do these tasks and figure out really where they're getting hung up, what their challenges are. You know, does language make sense? And our goal is really to learn from them in order to gather these results. And then we're going to synthesize the data and find trends, and then make recommendations, whether it is to make the site better. Oh, can we make these changes to the actual site? Or if it's something else like, oh, these instructions don't make sense to the user, the reader is confused by these instructions, we have to update the language. So what we're getting advised on is multiple things. But I did want to go back to this. So we're conducting them in multiple languages, which is actually outside of the norm of UX, which is really exciting because we're able to sit down with, you know, Spanish speakers on our team are able to sit down with actual Spanish speaking users and go through the entire site in that language. So I will share some pretty interesting results from those as well. So I'm excited that we're doing it that way. They're usually not conducted like that. Hold on, let me see. We can go to the next slide, but let me see, what is the question? How do I go? I'm on one screen, so it's kind of hard for me to like go back and forth.
Marlene, if it's helpful, we can read the questions for you. You just let us know when you want to pause, and between Enrica and myself, well, I guess this is my section, so I can do it. We can read the questions when you say you want to hear them.
Yeah, let's take your question right after this slide, because this slide actually it looks really messy, but to me it makes sense, and it's just expanding on the methodology. So if you can think of the user right here, this person that says user, this is who I'm talking about. You know, right now we're sitting with trainers and they're interacting with this. In this case, it's an application or a web page. Sometimes people don't know the difference. So they're interacting with this application. I'm learning what it is they're, you know, running into and what advice and feedback they're providing on almost every single task that I give them. Then we go back and we identify, like I said, we identify these trends, these larger trends. And then we evaluate what needs to happen in order to address these issues. And then we go back and design these things. And the design phase is interesting because, you know, we're not the developers, but we can advise on the design. So there was a question about, has customization already been completed, or will that be informed by user testing? That will be informed by user testing. And at this point, we're just, well, I still need to synthesize the data we've received. We have a lot, and it's in multiple languages. So I'm really going to tailor it based on language. Yes, and then it goes back. You know, we work with the developer, we work with our DCYF training team to really implement these things and then do it all again. We're going to see if whatever happens, put it again in front of the user to see how they react to it, or if it was helpful, if these changes are helpful. And this is going to be in the future, so we're not even there yet. So Lois, yeah, if you could tell me your question one more time, that would be great.
Sure. I was trying to see if there were any other questions in the chat, but so far that's it right now. Is just to see, you know, if you can share. Here's another one too from Sharitha. Will you please share why providers are almost at the end of the process and what the field would like?
Oh yeah, that's
okay.
a good question.
I'm sorry. Okay, let me try this question again. I'm confused even reading it myself. I was typing in a thought bubble. So my question is, why are providers at the end of the feedback cycle? And was there ever any work conducted to say, hey, providers, you know, and what would you like to see if you can have a training site? What would it consist of, and what would you like to see? And then if you could also share how long this platform transition has been in the work. And then Charissa, I'll make sure and ask your question.
Yeah, so providers are going to be the next set of users to sit down with us and do this like testing and feedback gathering. And that makes sense because, I mean, I think it's also programmatic from our side is we're going to transition the trainers first. So they're able to start adding their trainings, get them comfortable with the system. So that way trainings are, you know, moving from one place to another without a break, I guess, if that makes sense. And you know, but that's how I see it from where I stand is it makes sense to move the trainers in first so there's no break in that training delivery. And then providers come second, where we sit down with trainers have to just be aware and know what to do, how to do their trainings on this site, how to like update them, how to offer them before we even transition to the learners and learn from them what they need so they can access these trainings. But it sounds really discombobulated, but it'll go smoothly if we're engaging them correctly.
So maybe I just didn't, let me try to rephrase my question. At what, was there any point when providers were asked or providers, when I say providers, that's inclusive of directors, teachers, educators, everyone. So at what point was the field asked what they would like to see in an early learning training system? That's the first question. Second is, how long has this been in the works? And then my third, I'm going to add this on, then I'm going to go back up and there are other questions too. From the communication that was sent out, it seemed like this would be a website that providers can access at will for trainings, but now it sounds more like it's an online platform for STARS classes. So maybe you can clarify that too. And then I want to read Charissa's question.
Marlene, maybe I can take a historical part of this because some of this was actually before you were with DCYF. So that's how long ago some of this has been happening. Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Abrams, and I'm the Professional Development Workforce Administrator at DCYF. If I haven't spent time with you recently, I'm glad to be here. So Lois, your question about how providers and getting their input on what do we want to see in a training site. The most in-depth details were not actually really recent, where we did a huge study of what's in merit and how to improve merit. We worked with a third-party evaluator, Anthrotech, during our race to the top days. That's how long ago it was. And we've never been able to move forward on all, I shouldn't say all, we haven't been able to move forward on the majority of recommendations that came from that third-party evaluation. And that third-party evaluation included taking multiple focus groups. And I don't know if you might remember some of this, Lois, or if you participated or anyone else here on the call has, but we had multiple focus groups coming together. They were in groups of like 10, doing the image like Marlene showed, where we learned a lot about what people were not getting support with as they were navigating the system. And so we've heard a lot of these themes over many, many years and through that third-party evaluation. Things like, it's not in my language, it's not accessible, I can't search for trainings in the way I need to, I can't find trainings on the content that I need, I'm not able to find the trainer that I want, my evaluations are not included on there, I want to put an evaluation on there, I want to choose my training based on a certain evaluation criteria of knowing who I'm taking a training with. We've heard so much both from that structured third-party evaluation as well as over the years. We've had some webinars and they've been kind of looser in ask, but we do webinars regularly where we talk to people in the evenings when we host them and say, what is it that you would like to see? So over the delivery and feedback as it's been related to trainings that we deliver consistently, like childcare basics, equal, pace, and other topic areas, there's been this theme that has also been included in how has our online delivery been working for you or not? And so it's been really embedded through there. So with those themes, I'm kind of transitioning to part 2 of like, why are we starting with trainers? We're saying, okay, we want to create a system that we can say, we've heard a collective theme of feedback and put something that is available to be played with from a provider's perspective, now that we've heard a lot of what people want. And that's why the trainers are before the providers, because the trainers are asked, what is it that you need to create training, to input training, to make a training exist on this site? And then providers are interacting with that system and saying, if I were taking this training, am I getting what I need out of this design? I was there.
So as you know, turnover in this field can be high, even though there are a number of directors and owners here. Who have been in the field for quite some time. And, I'm thinking, because if I remember, as you talk about Race to the Top money, that's been quite a while ago.
Oh, it
And
was.
so
That's when it
might have
started.
been nice to be able to go back out and to find out again if that's still the need of the field. And plus, you just think about how many technological advancements have happened since Race to the Top, which then, of course, makes a difference in how people want to learn or choose to learn, as well as folk are reevaluating that work-life balance that a lot of people are considering with as after dealing with the pandemic that's still ongoing, but the majority for the last 3 years. So I think that going to trainers first, and I wish that we had been invited ELAC a little bit earlier in this cycle to be able to say, I think it'd be a good idea to go back out to the field. That's my opinion. There are other ELAC members who will weigh in. But it really would have been nice to go back out and say, hey, what would you like to see? And then Marlene, if you can, just to be a little bit clear about what the site's going to do. As far as if it's going to offer live trainings. Again, from the communication that was sent out, it seemed like it was just going to be a place where you could just go to and participate in trainings at your pace, but this feels a lot more like where you sign up for trainings that are basically going to be zoomed into you. And if I'm wrong on that, please correct me. But I still stand, Angela, by saying that this would have been nice. And I see some comments in the chat from others who agree that it would have been nice to be able to go back out to the field.
Yeah, and
Sharissa.
Sorry, can I say
Go
one more
ahead.
thing and then I'll turn it over to Sharissa or Marlene. One other thing I want to just share as a sensitivity that I've held on to is it's really challenging sometimes to have a current contractor of a vendor for a system while also pursuing a new vendor contractor. And there's sometimes that we've had, I just want to put that out there because we're careful about that, right? We don't want to hurt any of our connections with people as it relates to that. And so when we've been gathering feedback, we've not been necessarily saying, we're having a brand new site, and this is what it's going to do. Well, we're currently also offering a current vendor who has this service with us. And so I think we're doing that cautiously, but we are gathering people's feedback as far as what providers want and need in the design by gathering their experience with our current system in feedback around childcare basics, enhancing quality, pace. And so all of these providers who are going through these trainings, hundreds of providers, get the opportunity to say, did this learning work for me? Did it not work for me? What would have worked better for me in this training site? And so even though we're not asking them the question, we're building a brand new site, what do you want it to be? We are asking them questions over many years, especially the last 2, and in light of COVID, of what does learning look like for you now and what would you like to see differently?
I'm going to go on to Sharissa's question, which says, will the new training site include all the training supports application process for those looking to apply to become a licensed childcare and early learning provider, thinking specifically about the licensing online orientation.
I think I can take that. And also I think maybe starting with a question you had asked Lois about really what is the site doing? What is happening with it? So currently when folk are interested in training, searching training, they'll go to Merit, they'll look for trainings. Some of those trainings are in person, some of those trainings are online. If a provider chooses an online training, they're routed to the current training site, which houses all of the online training, the online childcare basics, online EQAL, a lot of those required trainings. If people were choosing an online option, they would be routed and take that training through the current training site. So what we're talking about here with this new platform is that it will combine those things together. The searching for trainings, whether it's searching for in-person trainings or online trainings, will be searched in the same location. That ultimately the trainings, if someone chooses an online training or some type of hybrid training, will all occur in the same platform now. So that's one piece. And then I think so. Some of the required trainings that that someone must take to once they become licensed, those will be offered in the training site. That some of those again are in person, some of those can be online. But some of the other pieces, like applications to become a licensed childcare provider, those things are not part of the platform.
All right, so I believe, Sharissa, unless you have a follow-up question, I see that Angelia has her hand up. And is this a good time still, Marlene, for questions and Karma, or do you guys want to keep moving forward?
Yeah, go ahead, Angelia.
Okay, thank you. And I should put that's so funny hearing that. You can call me Angie. I should put that in parentheses, but because it's Angelia. But anyway, going on from that, I am concerned about the trainer component. I have an ECAP site as well as a childcare site. And the thing that was problematic for us is that PACE was not compatible with ECAP. So I'm concerned that we're developing something that won't be compatible for those systems. And who are the trainers? Because for us, we have things that are called coaches. And will our coaches understand how to work with this? Or is this only specifically for a DCYF trainer type person? So I'm just confused with all that language and the different systems, who works where with what. So I'm a little concerned about that. Thanks.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. I'm not sure what to say about PACE and the compatibility, because I think some of what you're speaking to, Angie, is maybe pertains to content and that aspect of the trainings, which is not something that I can speak to. I also think I heard, confusion about what's in what site and where to go for what and who's using it, which I think is feedback that DCYF has consistently received across. There's just so many different platforms holding different pieces of data. And so part of the vision of this is moving to someplace that can organize those pieces. And then if there was a coach from Childcare Aware, that the coach is also utilizing the site, is able to use that site to look at staff records, see what trainings have been attained, and engage the staff in a dialogue about their training progress. So we do see coaches and others as another user group that really have a need to use the site and be familiar with the site, and specific resources and tools will be developed for them, as well as licensors and others who have a need, special kind of use case for the site as well. So we're talking and thinking about the trainers and setting them up, and then the providers, but there are lots of other users that will play a role in the site and need to have access and familiarity as well, just really with the overall goal of having a go-to place for training and training requirements and training progress rather than sort of scattered across multiple different platforms. But I just want to maybe add one more thing. When we go into the breakout, please, if you're feeling like there was just more to your question that we weren't able to answer, please feel free to reiterate it again on the Jamboard, as we will be able to provide fuller responses and maybe add some more context to those questions and suggestions. So please feel free to add them there.
All right, I think it's me still. Do you want to click on the next slide? Okay, so I'm still on UX and the human-centered design approach and why it's important. And to put it simply, it's important because the process is helping us, DCYF, it's advising us on what we need to do in order to provide the best experience for our users. And like Karma mentioned, those are multiple. We do have multiple audiences, and we have limited staff. So that's another reason why we're kind of grouping them to really gather their input based on their usage and then implementing that feedback and moving forward. But yeah, by conducting this research, I get to learn like where users are getting stuck, where they're hung up, where they're going to require extra attention, and or where language doesn't make sense, or where instructions don't make sense. It might be a process thing back to our team, and it really just helps our team learn how to best support them when we transition to this process. And this is before, during, and after the rollout. And the research allows me to have the data to back up our strategy and design decisions as well, like based on the users. There was a comment about childcare providers and their design feedback. They're going to be next, and they're going to provide us the feedback we need, to move forward to either design the site better for them or provide the supports they need in order to successfully transition to the site. So, I mean, this image shows exactly that. Designers often create something that they think is amazing, but the user experience actually differs that. And what we're doing is actually putting the design in front of them to see how they use it to make it better for them. So let's see, I have some notes here. I'm not sure if I should stop and read these comments. Yeah, so these are really good questions. And I mean, I will get to the user testing results, but they've been pretty good, which has actually been pretty surprising to me in this phase. But, I think Karma mentioned that there's 13 or 14 other states that already use this system. And I'm guessing what they've done has been a lot of UX for their own, platform that this company has created, because experience-wise, it's pretty easy to use. But I'll get to those results in a second based on language. So I want to just say that we're kind of doing things backward, where typically, we would create a policy or whatever and put it in front of the user. Or in this case, if we were to do things the traditional government way, we'd be like, hey, users, you have to use this new site. Good luck. And then after the fact, we find out where they're getting stuck. And then we're struggling to make resources for them. And, we're doing things backward, where we're actually learning where it is that they're having the most issues to mitigate those when we do go live. So that is really exciting to have. And we're going to have feedback on all of this, on all the users. Okay, so you can go to the next slide because this is, I'm going to talk about the early findings. So this is really focused on the trainers. Like Karma mentioned, we've conducted testing and research with trainers right now, all in the month of November in the 3 languages. And the feedback is really focused on 2 main themes: technical, so the site usage, so how someone navigates the site and how they use it, and really communications and support. So first I'll start with the English speakers. So technical wise, the site is pretty easy to use. It's intuitive for the most part, and it feels comfortable. And these are actual quotes from a user who stated the lowest tech use. So when we search for participants to help us conduct testing, I ask how do you feel using technology? And I'm like, if someone rates a low score, they don't feel very comfortable, those are the users I want to sit down with, because they're going to provide the best insight. Because obviously if users know, if they feel really comfortable with technology, I don't necessarily want to hear from them. I want to hear from those who are going to struggle the most. So this specific trainer, said he was very low tech use, and his actual quotes are, "This is much better since it's all online and it's pretty simple. The site is pretty easy and intuitive. It feels very comfortable and pretty easy to follow along with." And those are those quotes mirror most of the English testers that I sat down with. Communications, really the biggest barrier is terminology. Like we have Washington state specific language like training templates, and on the site they're listed as like events, or they just have different terminology. And so we're going to just need some onboarding resources, visuals, tutorials, step-by-step guides. So a lot of emphasis in that communications and support from technology. I mean, like I said, I'm not too worried about putting a new user on the site and having them do specific tasks because of the feedback we received. It is pretty easy to navigate. I don't want to compare it to Amazon, but when you're like shopping on Amazon and you click on something, you just intuitively know how to pay for it. And that's what users, were able to do when we sat down with them. They just intuitively knew where to click and what to do. Some things though, some titles, like I said, it comes back to language. Some of them were not intuitive. So that's work we definitely need to go back to and work on. So like I said, we conducted these testing sessions in other languages than Spanish and Somali speakers. And I'm going to just go over that feedback. So site is needed in the language of the user. Obviously, if you're like sitting down with someone who speaks Spanish, and if you have them, first you have to like determine terminology, like create a training template. How do you even say training template in Spanish? It's hard for them to find these Spanish terms in an English site. So the site is definitely needed in another language. And some terminology is just not intuitive in that language. So this one had a lot of emphasis around communications and engagement, around terminology, basics of the training program. Definitely these communities are asking for tutorials and learning sessions. And now I'm going to go specific to Spanish speakers, what we heard from them. So the main themes include language and communication. Technical wise, the biggest concern is that they want to find out if the site is going to time them out on specific tasks. And that's because this website has the capability to upload a lot of documents. For instance, if you're a trainer and you want to upload your resume, they want to know if they're on that tab, if it's going to time them out, if they're working on that resume in real time. And then communications, yeah, like I said, tutorials and those learning sessions are definitely needed. And there was a big emphasis around the basics. So not about the site, but training program overall, which is really good to know, because then we can treat this as a much bigger project than just like transitioning to the site. It's really looking at the entire program and seeing how we can make it better for all users, like back to the basics. Somali speakers, it was similar to Spanish speakers. The main themes also include language and communication as their biggest barrier. And there was a really high emphasis on engagement. Somali speakers want to hold informational sessions to find out more about this project. It's really about the why, and it's similar to your questions, Lois. How did this come about? Why did this come about? Why is this happening? So more of that historical context is needed, and the Somali speakers did ask for that. Technical and communications, they're really asking for live or video tutorials, and not so much in a written format. So they want to gather in their languages, have live tutorials, be able to ask questions on the new site, and just go over, again, the basics. Differentiate between what is required and what is optional. What do they need to do on the site versus what is optional and what is extra. So yeah, overall, I mean, feedback is promising. Like I said, I was surprised to find out such little feedback on the technology side of things, because this process does advise on the technology, and it's usually the biggest barrier for a user is when they're put in front of a site and they just have issues like moving forward, or things are really hard to navigate. But mostly they were positive comments on the tech side of the house. Really where we're going to have to do a lot of work is around that communications and support, which is, yeah. Comments around suggestions or frustrations were nearly non-existent. And like I said, that's surprising. In this phase, usually people are like, oh, this is hard. And then you go back to the drawing board, and then you have to revise whatever it is where people are really struggling. But I did not find that during this phase. So I'm curious, yeah, it'll be interesting to put it in front of childcare providers. We're going to be conducting them in Spanish and Somali as well. So we'll hear from them, because, we're working with trainers now, and I'm assuming they're used to using technology. So it'll be very insightful when we learn what we hear from childcare providers when we sit down with them, and what we'll need to do to really help them move in this, help them use this new site when we transition. And then again, just users will need to get used to using a new site. It will require just different, it's going to be a different view. It's going to be a different feel for them. But yeah, the biggest thing is the terminology, like courses versus trainings, just little small things here and there that can be combated with the correct communication. So areas where additional information is needed can be easily implemented, but our team has a lot of work to do around that engagement in teaching. We're going to need to go back and provide this information to the training team and let them know this is what each community is asking for, and we have to create a game plan to really support them in this transition based on their language. All right, and
All right.
Next.
Marlene, if I may, it is 1:51, and I know we had wanted to spend some time in breakout groups. So I was just checking in with Erin to see if we can go past 2 o'clock, and if you and Karma also have the capacity to do so, because we want to be sure that we want to hear the whole presentation, but we also want to definitely have time for the breakout groups.
We can absolutely accommodate that. I'm going to kick that over to Marlene and Karma, whatever they're able to do. And then I think, Ida, I think Eric might have touched base with you about just maybe starting the next item a few minutes late.
Yes.
Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, then we should be good to go.
All right, thank you. Just doing my time check. And sorry, I didn't realize I wasn't on camera, so thank you.
So UX, these are the next steps. I'll go really quickly through it. Like I said, in November, we met with trainers. We're going to synthesize those results. We're going to provide these recommendations to the training team and also those tech feedback to the developer. And basically, we're going to, like that image says, we're going to try things out and then put it in front of the trainers to see how these supports help them. And in 2023, we are going to go to childcare providers where we're going to recruit them. We're going to recruit several in multiple languages to see who wants to test, and we're going to sit down with them and get their feedback in 2023. And I just want to let everyone know here is that I am keeping a spreadsheet. We did send the first communications out to all childcare providers in October, and I received a lot of interest in that testing for learners, for the childcare providers, and I am keeping a live spreadsheet. So if that's something you're interested in being part of, please let me know, and my email address is at the end of this presentation. But for future communications, we are going to be communicating this information via the PD newsletter. When we start looking for childcare providers, we're going to send it to the all providers list, which is managed by our communications office, and everything will be updated on our webpage, which is that DCYF training site webpage that Karma, and I put the link up here too. If you have any questions on this, you're welcome to email me as well. And yeah, we can do the Jamboard now.
Yeah, just a few things before we go into the Jamboard. I'm noticing Susan's comment in the chat. What if feedback from providers is clear that the new training plan needs to go back to the drawing board? How will that be handled? I think at first it's important to establish that DCYF was not in a position of creating a new training site or building something from the ground up. It was necessary to look for a product that already had some of the basic features. So we're talking about being able to search for trainings, being able to offer online training. So some components that already match what would be needed in a training site. So it's kind of this basic shell of components. Within that, we have a lot of capacity to make adaptations within the tool, which a lot of that will be stemming from the user testing that Marlene's doing, really helping us think about where the terminology is not matching the verbiage we use here in Washington, or where where there might be some confusion. Some of those things can be addressed in the tool with the vendor. Some of those things might be types of guidance that we provide. And then it's also sort of how are we using it to meet the needs of Washington? So it really is kind of a tool that is at our disposal. So we do have a lot of ability to adapt this tool as we go. And by starting with the trainers and the training orgs, that really is giving us a sense of how those trainings will live within the system, be able to work the training orgs to really finesse the components that are supportive of them, and then roll that out to providers. So we're not going live with the site until after we've conducted the user testing, until we've incorporated feedback, and really have a product that is informed by many of the different users, all of the different users who will be using the site. That said, I really would invite you to please put any questions and comments down. We have 2 prompts, questions that you have for us, suggestions that you have about the training site. We left those purposefully open-ended with the hope that we will not be limiting any feedback that you might want to offer us at this stage. And know that we will be providing responses to anything that you put there. So there are things in the chat, or again, things that were raised that you don't feel that we adequately answered, please drop those back into that Jamboard so that we can offer another opportunity to respond. So with that, I see looks like the Jamboard's in.
Are we going to do 10 minutes still for the breakouts?
Yeah, I think that should be a reasonable amount of time. That sounds good. Any questions about the activity? Or yeah, go ahead, Lois.
Yeah, Karma, would you please just kind of talk about what you want folk to do in the activity? Thank you very much. And then I also want to just reflect back on something that Debbie Ham said earlier that's in the chat. And she was just agreeing with my concern. But I think the key of what she says is your concerns reflect a consistent practice of DCYF, including provider voice, long after changes mostly developed or policy has been decided. Carmen and Marlene, excuse me. I knew a Marla, so forgive me, Marlene. Every time I see your name, I do that, so forgive me. Karma and Marlene, I know you are new, but I just want to, since I was reading the comments in the chat, share that out. That was one that none of us read. And I just want to bring that to your attention. As we look at moving this forward in a way, I have several comments that I'll include, but again, don't want to take away from the time. So why don't we come back together? We'll split into our groups and come back together at 10 after 2.
That sounds great. So the link will take you to a Padlet. There's a page for questions. You can scroll to the page for suggestions. If you need any support using the Padlet, feel free to chat me and I can help you. You'll be able to put up a comment, a response, a post rather, and then respond or comment to someone's post. So if someone's already posted something you wanted to say, you can elaborate on their post as well. So hopefully that's all clear. We'll be here to answer any questions or provide any support as needed. And let's go ahead and do the breakout.
Is the jam board gone?
Hey guys, we had you guys brought us back too early.
Yeah.
We had a little bit more time.
Is my jam board, is it still there? Okay. I need to edit mine.
Okay, well, we're back now, ELAC members and RAs and community members, but the jam board, it should still be in the chat.
Yep, I see
So
it.
please feel free to continue to add to that. CE team, will you be sending that out, and is there a deadline for feedback?
So I will defer to Karma and Marlene. We're happy to share it with the follow-up and leave it open for however long based on their deadlines. So
I'd say the biggest driver for us is having time to respond and get those responses back to you. So Lois, do you have a recommendation of what would be a good length of time?
Well, there are two ways we can do this because this is an ongoing project. We can look at including it in the feedback loop with answers to the questions because you will be getting back to us. But there are members who had to leave early who aren't in attendance. So I think it would be good to get their feedback. We're moving into the holidays, so maybe a week from now. I think, would that be sufficient? Aaron and the CE team and Karma and Marlene?
Works for
us. We kept it open for a week.
And then Karma and Marlene, then I'll connect with you guys about getting closing the feedback loop and getting responses in preparation for the February meeting.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Enrica, how does that sound to you?
That sounds great.
And ELAC members, I see you can do thumbs up, RAs. All right, thank you guys. So Marlene, I see thumbs going up, great. Marlene and Karma, it's always a pleasure to see you, and I thank you for being here and answering the questions as best you could. And Marlene, it always brings me joy to hear children in the background. So never ever apologize for that. That's why we're all here. That is what motivates us to be here. So I thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to Enrica.
Hey, thank you, Lois, and thank you again, Karma and Marlene. I'm just going to share with everyone right now. I've been experiencing some internet instability issues. So if you don't hear me or if suddenly I am no longer on screen, that is why, just some internet problems here. But hopefully we can get through this last section. But I'm very happy to introduce Ida Rodriguez. She is a member of the Fair Start Kids Act Temporary Licensing Subcommittee and will be presenting on their recommendation report. So I will turn it over to Ida.
Hello everyone, how's everyone doing today? I got the end of the presentation for today. So we'll be covering, as Enrica said, the First Start for Kids Act Temporary Licensing Subcommittee. And it's quite a bit of slides. So if I'm speaking too fast, please feel free to tell me to slow down. The Fair Start for Kids Act, the $1 billion investment to make childcare and early learning more affordable for Washington families by expanding accesses, capping copays, and providing resources to support childcare, school age and early learning providers. This temporary licensing subcommittee was established in part of that, and the subcommittee of the Early Learning Advisory Council with ELAC directly. So the following recommendations have been submitted for review by DCYF. A lot of us on the TLS board or committee gave feedback and stuff like that. The legislation directed the subcommittee to examine strategies to increase the number of licenses childcare providers in the state, including meeting the prospective licenses, to explain the licensure requirements, and inspect and provide feedback on the physical space that is contemplated for licensure. Develop model policies for licensed childcare providers to implement licensing standards, including but not limited to completing the childcare and early learning licensing guidebook to be made available to support providers with compliance. Develop recommendations regarding incentives and financial supports to help prospective providers navigate the licensing process, and then also provide feedback and recommendations to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families by December 1st of 2022. The TLS met for the first time on January 12, 2022. Throughout 2022, the subcommittee met every 2 to 3 weeks. As a result, the first meeting with 66 individuals completed an interest form to receive TLS updates. Participants in the group on January 27th, the Parent Advisory Committee was providing an update on the group itself. Over the next 10 months, the TLS met a total of 14 times. Each meeting focused on specific topics and typically included related items presented by subject matter experts from DCYF, external partners. Attendance at each meeting ranged from 11 to 37 individuals, with an average of 14 attendees per meeting. As of October 25th, 2022, there are 71 participants. A full subcommittee timeline is available in Appendix B. The recommendations and themes on what was discussed through the TLS was translation, interpretation, and language access were one of the 3 major recommendations, really priding itself on language equity. Transparency and trust was a part of the 7 recommendations, and overregulation. There are about 13 recommendations in regards to the overregulation statute associated to WACs, and then also the compensation and provider supports. There's about 14 recommendations. On the theme of translation, interpretation, and language access, we want to be able to reduce barriers in becoming licensed. Providers identified a need for increased translation, interpretation, and language access. Many providers across the state have trouble accessing licensing materials and resources due to the lack of translated materials and interpretive services. The recommendation that was made was there should be a process where providers who speak any of those specific languages can request translation information and documents in their preferred languages. Also, the licensing division should engage providers as experts in creating a tool in place for current checklists that can be translated and used as a trial run with incoming providers and providers who would likely more clarity on what is expected during monitored visits. Providers should be able to request a hard copy of the child care and early learning licensing guidebook in English, Spanish, Somali, Arabic, Chinese, simplified, and Russian, free of charge for each classroom in their program and administration, which I love the new book, and we did have the green book printed, so that would be nice. Providers also identified the need for transparent communication to build trust between DCYF and providers. It is believed that trust is a critical strategy toward the goal of increasing the number of licensed childcare providers from Washington State. Childcare providers want to be partners with DCYF and be respected for the vital work they do for every sector of our economy. The recommendation on transparency and trust, again, were to schedule quarterly meetings between the licensing division, including leadership and Washington State providers. These meetings should be an opportunity for providers to inform DCYF on what they're facing in the childcare sector and include a questions and answer session with concrete follow-up through an unanswered questions. Recommendations were DCYF should create a call line staffed by licensor or those with licensing knowledge to answer providers' questions, including anonymous questions. The call line staff should not just direct providers to their specific licensor, but be able to answer questions consistently with the licensing staff in the field. Improve the licensing division, CPS investigation process by creating as much transparency as possible. Identify standard for allegations so that providers are not being investigated without merit. Accusations are put into writing, and DCYF provides a redacted copy of allegations to providers. The Provider Support Subcommittee of ELAC should be a partner in creating the outline of the licensing division CPS investigation process. An additional recommendation was providers should get a report of what feedback influenced policy decisions, funding requests, and programmatic decisions so that they can see how their hard work is affecting DCYF policy. Also offer a survey that providers can review the licensor after the licensing visit. DCYF needs to share some more information about inter-rater reliability training tools for licensors. The IRR should be clearly communicated to providers as optional, and DCYF sends a survey to providers to evaluate IRR visits. DCYF requirements and guidelines are in line with requirements from other state agencies like the Fire Marshal, Department of Social and Health Services, the Department of Health, etc. It is the responsibility of DCYF to align with other agencies, and providers are responsible for aligning with DCYF requirements. Another recommendation on overregulation: licensors should be trained in expectations from other agencies and able to provide information in writing so they can be a resource to providers who have questions. Build in growth period for incoming providers who wish to be licensed with gradual requirements. Establish clear defined timeline goals. Assign licensors as technical support representatives and current provider as a mentor. Create a stipend program for mentor organizations to assist new providers. Basic health safety needs should be in place upon opening a new center. First aid, CPR, food handler's card, background checks. Professional development and education should be very gradual requirement unless concerns are raised. Eliminate unnecessary training and education requirements that may not be necessary to successfully perform the job and do not align with staff compensation. DCYF should only require minimum safety standards and identify other avenues for recognizing and incentivizing providers who go above and beyond. DCYF should eliminate mandates that do not come with funding for providers. The cost for unfunded mandates are passed on to families or absorbed by providers through low wages and few, if any, benefits. Required training should qualify for stars, hours, and DCYF should create a stipend system for substitutes who fill in for staff attending training. Additionally, notify providers that a licensing visit will take place within the next 30 to 60 days. Separate violations that are against an individual employee from true violations or complaints against the facility. Violations directly related to staff persons should follow that staff and be viewable by other potential employers. Eliminate the emergency whack around reporting openings. Ensure staff members' full names are not listed in childcare check to protect employee privacy. Use, in connection to compensation provider support, use quality improvement funds to support the early achievers review process and develop a different avenue to demonstrate quality childcare to receive subsidy, not early achievers as the only option. Look at all the early achievers requirements with an equity lens. Also, to incentivize all providers to accept WCC subsidies, DCYF should increase subsidy payment to 100% now and identify a goal for family participation. And to meet the FSKA goal of increasing provider participation in working connections childcare subsidies, we recommend eliminating participation in early achievers as a requirement to serve children on WCC subsidies. Additional compensations and provider supports, we recommend making early achievers voluntary. In addition, WCC rates increase for those who early achievers ratings 3 to 5 should remain, and fund the rate increase from level 3.5 as already mandated. DCYF also needs to make funding more equitable between regions as identified in cost of quality of care study commissioned by the legislator through the Child Care Collaborative Task Force. Also, merit needs to be fixed to better support providers. Additionally, we'd like to increase supports for providers to allow more guidance and accessibility to become licensed, making licensing requirements more achievable by focusing on the health and safety of children and fund any additional requirements. Should this recommendation be adopted, we further recommend that new licensing rules that may have a financial impact should also be supported with funding from DCYF. Develop a new team within DCYF solely focused on unlicensed care, which would include imposing fines, fees for the operation of unlicensed care facilities, notification and education to families, like unlicensed care campaigns, scouting unlicensed care, etc. Additionally, require all care of children, regardless of hours provided in Washington State, to be licensed and follow the same rules and regulations of DCYF. If exemptions are allowed, a registry of license exempt facilities and providers needs to be created, including an application process, mandatory reporter training, CPR, first aid training, and background checks. The registry should be updated and maintained regularly and made publicly available. A provider's rights and resources documents should be created by an outstanding organization utilizing the liberatory design process in partnership with DCYF, provider supports, ELAC, WCCA, represented and non-represented family home providers, FFN, WCFC, etc. Status updates on the internal review panel process for which some providers applied and were selected to join, but have yet to be contacted should be provided to ELAC, who we recommend determine accountability measures. Quarterly updates should be provided to all providers and ELAC. The rulemaking process should have step-by-step guide to that providers are made aware of the process, including how to appeal a decision or support a petition. Recognizing the urgency, the step-by-step guide should be available by March 31st, 2023. And I can't believe I went through all that. Yay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ida. Before we let Ida go, does anyone have any questions? Really appreciate taking the time to walk through all of those recommendations and also just really reflects the tremendous work that went into doing that. But any questions?
Does anybody know when the report will be finalized and submitted?
It already has.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. It was the document, I don't know if you remember, Susan, that was sent around to see our petition for it. This is basically the overall gist of everything that was in that.
Okay.
And yeah, if you want, I think Eric mentioned that we could get a copy of the report that was sent.
I would love to see the finished copy.
We can be sure to share that in the follow-up email, Susan.
Okay.
Be great. Great question. Thank you, Susan, for asking that. Other questions? All right.
Very good.
Okay. Great. Well, it looks like we are we're right on time. We might be ending early here. So our meeting is coming to a close. But before we wrap up, we do have some questions, a few questions, just to get a sense of, are folks interested in perhaps having an in-person meeting in 2023? So I believe Jessica's already put a link into the chat box, and maybe if you can take a moment to provide some feedback, and that will sort of help inform what we might be doing next year.
And I just want to give a shout out that the next question will be inviting you to tell us more about your choice. So we do encourage you to share as much as possible on why you chose yes or no and what considerations are going into that for you.
And Erin, maybe you could let me know when you see it's time to change slides. It's hard for me to see that on my end.
Yeah, I can keep an eye on that here. Let's see.
Great, thank you.
Looks like it's slowing down. And also, so we can move forward to the next question, but if anybody didn't get their vote in, feel free to throw it in the chat. This is just kind of a temperature check, so. And we would love to hear as your thoughts on this, especially. It really helps us when we're trying to think about 2023 meeting planning and what changes we might need to be making on our end.
And thank you, Jessica. In case you missed the link the first time, has been placed again into the chat. Maybe we'll give a minute or two for this. Sometimes it takes a little bit to formulate those responses, or perhaps you don't have additional feedback to share.
I probably have a snide remark, but until we can have adequate staff, I don't know how the hell we're supposed to try to do all of this.
That's helpful to know.
And meet in person, but I'm sorry, I just have to throw it out there.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really the type of feedback we need. Yeah, thank you for sharing and being your candor. It's really helpful.
Yeah,
that was the same feedback I was going to share.
Thank you, Susan. That's what we need. That's really super helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I also want to say, like, we have a few minutes, so anybody that just wants to jump off mute and share verbally or in the chat, that's fine. And Angie, like what you shared, that's something we've heard from providers a million times, and it is really helpful. So I didn't think it was sassy.
I'm sorry. I just had two this morning wake up with COVID tests, and so they're positive, and I'm just thinking I'm glad I can do this Zoom, but I'm running back and forth that's why my face is not on here, because I'm running back, doing stuff, listening to you guys. I don't know how we're going to settle down yet.
Yeah, you make a lot of great points, and you're also bringing up a very, the health. We're dealing in a world of COVID, flu, RSV. These are really important things that we need to be considering to help inform, do we go back in person, or should we continue with Zoom or use a combination? So, and thank you also, Susan, for your feedback as well. Other thoughts that folks would like to unmute and share aloud with the group?
Enrica, this is Susan again. I mean, I only started participating in ELAC during the pandemic. When you guys met in person before, where did you meet?
Yeah, a lot of times, and Erin, you can add to this, where big hotel spaces, very oftentimes.
In what city?
ELAC would move around. It truly would rotate.
Okay.
Oh, yes, it would rotate all throughout the state. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, we would try to hit up at least most regions in a year, and we generally would choose venues that are close to airports. So, SeaTac, Spokane, Yakima were kind of like three of the heavy hitters, but we would also go to Bellingham, Vancouver, all over.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Tacoma, yeah.
And it looks like there's a comment in the chat. Don't want to miss that either, from Elisa. Just wanting to acknowledge the immense effort of the subcommittee. It was an honor to attend each time and get to understand the concerns of providers and ways DCYF can improve. Thank you, Elisa, for sharing. Great. I see a lot of feedback came in through the poll. This is really helpful.
And something I'm seeing in the comments that I think is a good thing to kind of keep in our minds is some people have expressed some interest in maybe not like returning to in-person ELAC meetings per se, but maybe having 1 or 2 meetings, in-person events or meetings, to have some kind of intentional in-person gathering of some kind. So I wanted to kind of throw that out there, that's also, if that's something that you guys are interested in, please share that feedback with us. If you think maybe 1 in-person meeting a year, or if you just want to hold off on that altogether. It doesn't necessarily have to be all or nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely seeing some themes here. Some themes around the long travel days, health considerations. And also seeing a desire to try to figure out a way to connect. So this is really helpful. So keep, adding your feedback. Oh, here's another one. Maybe considering a hybrid. Mm-hmm.
And I should clarify that if and when we return to in-person meetings, we will be offering a Zoom option always. Actually, I think they've updated the policies, so we have to, but we would be doing that anyway. But we will never, the days of only in-person meetings without a virtual option are over. There will always be a Zoom option, but of course, that adds another layer to the in-person piece, as far as like member interaction goes.
This is Nancy. This past month just went to the ELAC retreat, and they did a really excellent job of doing a hybrid, where there were people there, but the online people were, I just thought they did a really good job of making that happen for everyone.
That's good to hear, Nancy. I might want to go pick their brains because, yeah, that's something that we've done a little bit of pre-pandemic, but not nearly to the level and consistency that we would need to be doing it at for ELAC.
Right.
So yeah, maybe I'll connect with them and see if we can learn something.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Nancy. So it looks like we can probably move on to the next question. And this is kind of focusing on, should we stick with the 6 meetings a year that are full day, or should we try a different type of schedule? So maybe take a moment to share your thoughts to this. And Jessica, in case anyone's needing to access the Mentimeter again, if you could put the link back in the chat.
Enrica, I would like to share that for those of us who participated in the Fair Start for Kids licensing subcommittee, when we started to be able to do work with the DCOIF staff in real time and make edits in real time and actually be participating in the process, that would be the direction. I mean, attending an ELAC webinar where it's presentation after presentation doesn't leave, from my perspective, doesn't leave room for actual, where it's not just feedback, but it's a dialogue before things are, already sort of pre-baked. And so that is what I would like to see or hope to see happen with ELAC as we design it, so that we are on the front end of things before they're presented in webinar.
Great, thank you, Susan. I mean, that is the ultimate goal. That is what we want to be. I mean, ELAC is an advisory body. And so it is important that they have the opportunity to advise before things are already full and in process. So I totally agree. Totally agree.
I also wanted to call out that we will also be sharing, we'll be collecting feedback on this question as part of the follow-up for the meeting as well, especially for like the scheduling. This is something that we want to make sure we get as many ELAC members and regional advisors input on. So this won't be your last chance to weigh in on this, but we will be plugging it after the meeting to try to get everybody's opinion.
And we also want to share, we realize everyone is not here. So I believe, am I correct, Erin, that this will also be going out to the group. So I don't know, Erin, if you want folk to vote again when you send it out, or do you want folk who've already voted not to participate once you send it out again? I guess we can clarify that, everyone, but this just kind of gives us an idea, just something that we've been bouncing around.
I think what we'll do is just keep this Menti active, and I'm not sure how that works when you like leave a meeting, if you log back into the Menti, if it already knows that Jessica, do you know?
I don't believe the Menti will still be active once.
Oh, that's right, sorry.
It stops.
That's right, I always confuse Menti and SurveyMonkey. So yeah, we'll provide just like a kind of summary of what we've heard, and then people can weigh in if they have, but you know, we could just call out that we have counted the tallies that were given during the meeting, and if anybody else wants to weigh in. And then also, even if you have already voted in this survey, we would still like to hear from you if you have any additional if you have anything additional to share on this topic. Maybe there's a third option we're not thinking of, or if you have strong reasons for wanting one or the other, anything like that, any considerations, this is really helpful feedback for CE and the executive committee as we kind of go switch into 2023 mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow. Okay,
Great.
so it looks like, yeah, it looks like I think responses have slowed down. So we just have, I think, 2 additional questions just to get a sense of how you felt about the meeting today, if it was how productive it was it a good use of your time? So if you could take a moment to weigh in on that. And Erin, you can kind of let me know when you see responses start to taper.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it looks like we're reaching about 10 answers a piece. So yeah, I think.
Okay. I think we can go to the last one, maybe just kind of sharing a word or 2 to describe how you're feeling walking away from today's meeting. Yeah, just seeing sort of a range of feelings, you know, encouraged, gratitude, confused, tired, disappointed, informed. Yeah. And Erin, just let me know when it's.
Yeah, I think there might be one or two, but looks like it's
Oh, okay.
okay. I thought,
There it goes. Yeah,
we
there
have
it
a couple
goes.
more in there.
And
Yeah, and I-
showing appreciation for everyone in the space. Curious, stressed. Okay. Well, our next meeting is set for February 7th, 2023. And we'll also be sending out the 2023 meeting dates as well following this session.
I just want to
But
add
of
to
course, that
I
will
think
also
that
be
might be a
informed.
little-
That'll be informed by what we ultimately decide, if we have more frequent meetings or if we stay the course with the same 6 years.
Yeah. I
So-
think that typically we would share that like right after this meeting, but we're gonna press pause on that, but we will be getting that as soon as we can.
Yeah. But thank you everyone for taking the time and joining today. Have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks,
Lois,
everyone.
did you want to have any
Thank you.
final words?
I just want to thank the DCYFCE staff for everything that you've done in supporting our advisory group through all the changes and everything. I just want to thank you all very much, as well as our members and regional advisors, and of course, community members, because without your voice, we cannot affect change in this system. So I am appreciative of each and every one of you. And as Enrica has already stated as well, but just wanted to give, just to call out everyone and just let you know that I look forward to seeing everyone in the new year, if we are all so lucky to wake up another day. And that's it.
Crazy. The next time we'll meet, it'll be 2023.
Yeah.
So